r/AskReddit. What was the tipping point of your last relationship? When my then 4-year-old drew a picture. He drew 3 stick figures. One was angry, one was sad, and one was in a corner by itself. I asked him to explain and he said, "It's dad yelling at you, and you're crying and I'm sad." I was in a relationship I was scared to leave, but that was the moment that made me realize that my nightmare was my son's reality, and with having a newborn in the house, something needed to change. I told him how I felt that night. Couple weeks later, he left and disappeared for 4+ years. He abandoned his kids and went on a massive drug binge. I don't know that my now 10-year-old knows that he saved us all that day, nor do I think I'll ever share that with him. What I can say is life is so incredible right now. I've lost 110 pounds since that day, held a steady job with steady promotions over the last 6 years, and we're getting ready to welcome a beautiful baby girl into our family. Funny enough, it was something we both felt would be a positive for our relationship. She was planning on buying a house in a town near where we lived. We had lived in an apartment rent-free for 3 years, and she had always wanted a house. So the plan was we'd live separate for a year, and then I'd get a job in that town and move in. Then one night we were driving home with a friend, and she was so excited about the house and doing her own thing. Everything she was saying sounded like she wanted to be single, and after a few minutes of her talking about how excited she was to live on her own, I said, "Oh, it kinda sounds like you want to be single. Do you want to be single?" She responded with a, I don't know. Drove the rest of the way home silent, dropped the friend off, then went home, and we broke up the second we got home. Honestly, it was a huge relief. We were absolutely not the right fit for each other, and while we were okay at the time, there had been consistent bad periods with intermittent good times with us. We always worked as friends, but being in a relationship together was taking a toll on both of us. No hard feelings towards her, honestly, just wasn't meant to be. I found someone I work incredibly well with, and so has she, and I couldn't be happier for her. I was leaving the gym and told her I would be over to her apartment in about 45 minutes after I showered. I kid you not, at the 45-minute mark she was texting me upset that I wasn't there yet. I apologized and told her I had to go to the bathroom, so it's taking a little longer, but I was on my way and almost there. Showed up at about the 50-minute mark. She would not open the door beyond leaving the security latch attached, and only to tell me to fuck off. So, after about 5 minutes of trying to reason with her to let me in and her responding that she didn't want to hang out anymore because I took too long, because I was probably talking to some hoe at the gym, I decided to leave. When I got back to my apartment, I figured might as well entertain myself and play some video games. About 40 minutes later she shows up to my place banging on the door. I happily opened the door thinking she changed her mind. She sees that I was clearly playing video games and enjoying a glass of wine, walks over and picks up the wine and throws it on the ground, pissed off that I found something to do other than stare at the wall because she didn't want to hang out with me. She sees how in shock I'm at her reaction and tries to brush up the broken wine glass with her bare hands. She is bleeding and crying, and I'm in shock and pleading with her to stop because she is tearing her hands up. I suggest she leaves, and that was the last time we were in the same room together. What a whirlwind of a relationship that on was. Edit. Don't pity me, my friends. Pity the poor guy she married about 3 to 5 months after the day I described here in my story, lol. We moved into a house together, and things were a little on the rocks, but I figured I could work a little harder and she would too. I had my doubts as she was a control freak and really only took what I said about things at face value. Really saw that later on after we split. We had a huge fight about the living room paint color. She said it was just awful and couldn't put up with it. We went round and round about it for a week or so until I finally just decided I could concede on this one, but that I got to choose the bedroom color. She described it as a cream color, but like adding too much cream at a coffee. Disgusted was her word for it. I want to say, in the hoe, I'm standing in the paint aisle on my day off and utterly exhausted from a week of work and remodeling. I'm dead ass tired, and she's combing through the paint swatches. She finds the color and we get it mixed. We end up in an argument in the car as I'm opting for bed, and she wants to paint. I told her it is better to do it during the day, so we can open the windows and let it air out better. It was currently raining, and I didn't want watermarks. It escalated and grew until she finally just got so pissed that she left. I decided to be nice and start painting the opposing window wall to at least show her I heard her thoughts. I got it all mixed up and dipped the roller. Rolled over once and it all hit me at the exact same time. I was sick of her and her controlling attitude. I was done feeling like an ass for things I didn't do wrong. I was tired of living her dream life. You know why it hit me? That paint was the exact same damn color as the wall. He and I had this moment, lying on the bed, listening to some music, in my room, while the sun was setting, the city buzzing away below us, after a long day, and I felt this wholesome feeling, like I knew where I belonged. And right then and there, he looks at me and said, "If you ever leave me, I'm gonna make your life a fucking hell." Guess I belonged far far away from him. Edit. As to whether he actually fulfilled his promise, the breakup was ugly, as expected, and painful. We did love each other at some point, but it was the right thing to do, as I was unhappy, and could not see a future together. During the breakup he changed from begging me to stay to calling me every name in the book, threatening suicide, etc. And in the year after, he continued to write emails from different email accounts he created, even under my name. That was fucking weird, to stay true to his words. I didn't read most of them, and at some point he stopped. My life after the breakup was beautiful, tough, like a huge burden had lifted. So I guess, no, but he tried. She would threaten me with physical violence and self-harm for years. If I ever left her, I was made to choose between my friends or her. Certain threats made, if I choose friends over her, etc. Having to be in contact with her at all times. If I wasn't with her, going through my phone and years of messages with my closest friends whilst I'm asleep, etc. Deciding who I could follow on Instagram, be friends with on Facebook based off how attractive they were, or if she deemed them as a threat, etc. Even if they were long-term friends. Makes me feel sick thinking about it all again. Crazy shit. I was younger and didn't realize how abusive she really was. Lost a lot of friends because of her. She eventually did another one of her fake breakups, and I decided not to crawl back to the person that would always tell me that no one else would ever love me, etc. Said okay, I'll pick up my stuff tomorrow or something along those lines. And then she obviously freaked out, realizing I wasn't falling for her tricks and playing into her usual games. Haven't seen or heard from her in 4 years now. Edit. Added a few more details. At a food festival, standing in line for like 10 minutes for some French toast thing. He ordered first and got his food, but when it was my turn, I realized it was cash only, but I only had my debit card. He turned to me and basically yelled, "Wow, what are you going to do?" After being together for 10 months, cohabitating, and splitting everything 50/50, even though his salary was double mine. He wasn't willing to spot me $5 for French toast, and he had to call attention to it loudly in front of the whole line. Then we walked away from the vendor with him chomping down on his French toast and me empty-handed. It seems trivial, but if I had just stood in line with someone I love, or even a good friend, I would have just covered them. It gave me the impression that he would never really have my back. I could never see him the same after that, and we broke up the next month. Long distance relationship I'd sustained for a good 2 years. Secretly flew back because she seemed a bit off, and I thought I'd surprise her. I'm at her door, got her on the phone, ask her to go check the mail. She opens the door, there I am. She's completely in shock, but when I step through the door ahead of her, she rushes in, grabs my hand and tries to usher me back out. Before she manages it, I see the dining table is covered in cards. They're "congrats on your engagement" cards. I kinda had inklings she had a side dude, but it never crossed my mind that I was the side dude. Good times. Edit. Yeah, the other guy found out. Actually he already knew. She'd been in a relationship with this guy for much of the time I'd been away. I thought they were just friends. I saw no reason to distrust her and didn't even blink when they lived together. I thought it was weird that he was never home when I was in town during that time, but man, the one time he was there it was incredibly awkward and I had no idea why. I seriously thought he was just crushing on her. She didn't quite marry him. A year later she tells me it was a terrible mistake and she'd broken it off. And I took her back because I was an idiot and my self-esteem was in the toilet at the time. I wish I was kidding. Took me 6 years and a very brief marriage to realize this chick couldn't live without a side guy. Good times. Got really sick last March out of nowhere and doctors initially thought it could be colon cancer. I was only 23, so this obviously had me shaken to my core. They expedited everything, and a week after I first went in for my symptoms I was getting put under for them to take a closer look and get biopsies. Girlfriend knew what time the procedure was and roughly how long it would last. When I came to, I turned my phone on and was blown up from friends all over the US and the world. So middle of the night for them, asking me what the results were and how I was doing. No text from girlfriend. About an hour later she texted me saying, "Are you fucking serious?" And I asked what she was talking about. She responded that someone dinged her car door at work. I didn't respond. She then asked me how the procedure went and what the results were. She knew I was upset and said she figured I'd just tell her later. With my symptoms, the doctors told us if it was colon cancer, it would have to be pretty bad at this point, but yet she was fine with waiting an entire day to hear how I was. Luckily it wasn't cancer. I broke up with her not long after. There was no tipping point. The whole table was just pulled out from under me. It was just suddenly there's another woman. I've been seeing her this past month. When I tell you I'm going to my dad's, I'm staying with her and leaving you. Get out of my house. The other woman was his dad's girlfriend's sister, almost twice his age, with 2 kids. He was mid-20s. We'd been together the better part of a decade and living together for 5 years. It was very strange and very sudden. This was nearly 5 years ago. A fake they are still together. Edit. Since everyone seems to be focused on my tenancy at his place, he essentially inherited the place and paid all of the necessary monthly dues etc. I did not contribute to these expenses due to long-term illness and he did not charge me rent. I was never on any paperwork, and even if I had been, I still would have just up and left. 7 hours before I had a big test, she wanted to argue. There was no not arguing with her. If you stayed quiet, she kept going. If you disagreed, she kept going. If you took her side, you were lying. 2 hours into the fight, I tried to ignore her and go to bed. She told me to admit we are through. Might this be a way out? I said yes. She started questioning if I was serious, so I had to lay it out. Yes, we are done. I'm sick of this. We are done. We are over. You're moving. We are done. Now go pretend to sleep on the couch for 15 minutes before you coming back in here and yelling more about how I didn't come rescue you from the couch. Yes, I know you that well, and I'm sick of all your BS. Go sleep in your fucking car. I don't care. We are 100% done. I'm going to sleep before you ruin my final tomorrow. We are done. Edit. I could insert a classic fuck you Karen type comment, but I won't. My ex had many legit problems in life that I hope she was able to work out. Maybe she learned something from losing me? He was an angry, emotionally abusive person. Of course our relationship didn't start that way, but once it gets to its maximum, holy cow, you're in boiling water that you didn't even realize was heating up. We were engaged and I kept putting off wedding planning. One day I came home and we started talking about kids. I've never felt that I really wanted to have children, but more thought of it as a thing I might do if my spouse wanted them. Well, he started talking about it and I realized I never ever want to have your child. I examined that. Why? Because I was absolutely miserable and it had happened so subtly I didn't realize it. but hearing him talk about our future children made me realize that this person made me so miserable I couldn't even stand to think about our future together. I moved out that night. 6 years later, happily married to another person, happily child free, no regrets. It was the best decision I've ever made. Edit, the emotionally abusive thing, and also he wore brown shoes with black pants. What a monster. I realized I was a doormat going nowhere. We were together for 5 years, since high school, and I did absolutely everything for him as he was an asexual NEET who couldn't leave the bedroom. I'm not kidding. We lived with my parents for 2 years and he talked to my parents maybe 5 times all up. If I didn't bring him food, he didn't eat, and it was my fault. Also, we didn't have sex for months on end, and when we did he absolutely hated it, which was a huge blow to my self-esteem. If I accepted a longer shift at work I'd come home sore and exhausted just for him to get mad at me for making him starve. For most of the time living together he didn't have an income. He was later put on unemployment, so I paid rent for the both of us. Once he got unemployment payments he wouldn't let me touch any of it. I'm talking if I asked for $20 for groceries he'd get pissed at me for spending all his money. Anytime we argued he'd go silent for days. Like no matter what the situation was I'd end up apologizing. Because I couldn't take the isolation in my own bedroom, and then he wouldn't talk until he felt like it, which could have been days later. I started getting depressed about it all, thinking I was going to have to spend the rest of my life with him, or else he'd kill himself, and how trapped I felt. The tipping point was when I felt like I could make him proud. He never complimented me if I put on a cute dress and said how do I look I'd get back I don't know on a good day, or stop asking me on a shit one by combining his 2 favorite foods. I made pizza dough from scratch and waited for it to rise, made a dope ass mac and cheese, then combined those bad boys. It tasted absolutely fucking amazing. I took my creation to him and he didn't even taste it. He took one look and said I'm not eating that, it looks disgusting. So when I told him I spent hours making it, he just said then you eat it, I'm not touching that shit. That's when I knew there was absolutely no hope for us anymore. I posted this a while back, so here you go. Our relationship had been deteriorating for some time, and, to make a long story short, during the beginning of our junior year in college she broke up with me one night after being upset that I didn't invite her to a party. The thing is, she had known for over 2 years at that point that there is a party at my rugby team's house literally every Saturday night, and she was regularly there almost every week for the past 2 years without needing some sort of invitation from myself. And being that I'd passed out from drunkenness before 4 in the evening, I wasn't really up and at it at that time. Regardless of any of the details, she came into my room, where I was passed, and started yelling about how we were done. She grabbed my keychain and took the key that opened the back door to her house and left. Me being kind of fed up to begin with at this point kinda shook it off and determined that it was probably the best for both of us. The next day I went on with my life as a person who was no longer in a relationship. Apparently this wasn't the case for her though, and she was expecting that I would come back and apologize and try to get her back. About 24 hours after she told me we were done, she came to my house and came upstairs to where me and a few of my teammates, including a few who were in their first 2 weeks of college, were just hanging out. She, visibly drunk at this point, started yelling at me, so we went out in the hallway and I simply said that she had broken up with me the day before. She stormed downstairs, and I assumed left the house, and went back to my teammates. Moments later we heard a huge crash from downstairs, so I went downstairs and saw her throwing and turning over everything on the first floor of my house. I had zero idea how to deal with this, so I kinda just stood there in awe. There wasn't a single thing that wasn't nailed down that she hadn't thrown across the room. It was the most efficient storm of shit throwing I've ever seen. 2 months after my 17-year-old son died in a car crash, he told me his death was my fault because I'm such a bitch. Then, 6 months after that, I don't even remember what we were arguing about, but it was heated. I'm sure I mentioned to him how awful I thought he was to have said that about my son. He went into the kitchen and made himself a plate of food for dinner. I was cleaning up my things in the house and he saw me, and to tell you the truth, I don't even know what triggered him. He threw his plate of food on the ground. Upon seeing this, I about faced and headed to our master bathroom. While I was trying to lock the door, he burst it open, hitting me in the arm and head, knocking me down. He froze. I got up and locked myself into the water closet and sat on the toilet completely paralyzed with fear, trapped, no phone. He tried to break the door down. All the while, in my most calm voice I told him, this has escalated rapidly. If you break the door down, there is evidence for the police that you got violent with me. Just leave the room. I will quietly leave the house for the weekend. Nope. I saw his hands reach underneath the door as he tried to pry it open that way. Well shit. What do I do now? No time to think. He picked the lock and opened the door. I about shit my pants in fear. He picked me up by the arm and tried to embrace me saying how sorry he was. I walked away from him, packed a suitcase, and went to a hotel for the weekend. When people ask me why I left him, I just say, he crossed that one line. And that's all you need to know. My first serious boyfriend cheated on me with a female friend. She was a friend of his that he'd met only 2 months before the end of our relationship and a mild acquaintance of mine, since I wasn't blind to how much he wanted to get in her pants from the start. 2 years later, I dated the guy who was my first BF's best friend. When I had been dating him, he ended up cheating on me with the same chick. They'd meet up for lunch or dinner, and he'd lie about where he was going. They made plans to go to cons out of town and he'd tell me he was going with his dad. I calmly and politely told him I wasn't okay with him sneaking around with her, but let it slide multiple times until her little henchman sewer rat that couldn't survive without her nose being stuck up the chick's ass decided to sabotage me. She had heard of her friends write bad reviews for my business. They wrote fake stories about me, humiliated me by posting very personal information that they could have only gotten from my boyfriend telling their friend who was cheating with him. And the final straw wasn't even my boyfriend not standing up for me or even bothering to talk to these women about their behavior. It was me coming home early to the sewer rat henchman and my boyfriend sitting at his computer with their legs overlapping. Done. I was married for 11 years and the last couple of them, I had suspected he was cheating. I'm not going to bore you all with the details and skip to the tipping point. Valentine's Day of 2011 he called and said he had to work late, so we wouldn't be able to go to dinner as planned. I was crushed, but accepted it and stayed in with our 2 small sons and watched The Lion King. The next morning we are getting ready for work and he asked me to go into his car and retrieve his iPad so he could charge it a little before leaving for the day. I went into his car and didn't immediately see it anywhere, so I searched, and when I reached into the pocket on the back of the passenger seat, I found a Valentine's Day card from a woman. I walked back in and just held it up, and he went totally pale. He didn't even argue, just walked out the door. I moved out to my sister's house that day and filed for divorce the following week. Edit to at, I've dated here and there, but haven't gotten serious. I'm not gun shy or angry at men. I just felt improving myself and being a mother to my sons is what I wanted to do. Second edit, thank you, kind stranger, for the silver. My first ever, as I'm still a newbie around these parts. You truly made my night. As did everyone else that replied with well wishes and their own experiences. Edit again for silver. I'm literally typing through tears. I wish I had come to Reddit sooner, because some of the best people alive are here. Thank you again. My heart is bursting right now. 3 silvers in one day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's the little things that matter. I don't know how to express my love and gratitude to all of you. I just got my first silvers and now gold. Not to mention all the support through comments. I feel humbled, and I feel as though I need go pay it forward. I've been trying to keep up with all the comments, and I hope I did well. If I didn't reply to you, please know that I'm not ignoring you. I'm just overwhelmed with all the love and support. That includes those that blame me for the demise of my marriage. I don't harbor any resentment or anger. Also, thank you for the platinum, strangers. I'll put those coins to good use. Let her borrow my car so she could meet up with friends at the bars. We'd been on the rocks for a bit, but the town was notorious for girls getting raped, and she would have walked across town otherwise. Her phone died, and she didn't tell me where she was crashing that night, but I already knew. Caught a ride the next morning to the house of a male coworker I'd noticed her of being more than a little flirty with. Sure enough, my car was in the driveway. His roommate let me in, and I banged on his bedroom door. He answered in a bathrobe, and she was passed out in his bed. I asked for my keys, which she tossed to me, before rolling back over and going back to sleep. Told her we were done that afternoon. Honest to God, she was completely blindsided. I ran into her through mutual friends over the next year or so and more than once heard her mention that I just randomly dumped her. I have truly never known a more delusional, self-centered, awful person in my life. He went through my phone to look for messages with my ex-boyfriend. He lied about it when I confronted him, then lied again when I asked what he had been looking at. He had been a great boyfriend for almost a year of the relationship and then suddenly turned controlling within the last 2 months. Was trying to limit who I spent my time with and didn't want me to consume any amount of alcohol, not even one drink, when we were out together because I had to take care of him. He had autism, I had Asperger's. We were comfortable with the other person being on the other person's phone as long as the other person was sitting next to them because we had nothing to hide. He knew the rule. If he was so desperate to look at something on my phone, he could have done it while sitting next to me. It showed he had no trust in me. It was a tipping point after the months of controlling behavior, and he didn't find what he was looking for because there was nothing to find. I was young and stupid, totally blind to this dude's intentions. I was just desperate to finally have a boyfriend. A year into the relationship, my dad straight up gave the guy the 1969 C10 he'd been working on my entire childhood on the word the dude would treat me well. The very next day he stopped coming home right after work and wouldn't show up till 5 AM. I shouldn't have done this, but after a week of this, I went through his phone and sure enough he was banging someone else and kept telling her he would move out of our shared place that weekend now that he got the truck. I never saw him again after I left for work that day, and my dad was chill about the truck, despite me still being salty about it 10 years later. Side note, first time we met he had 2 toddlers with him. I asked if they were twins, and he said no, they were both his, but just 4 months apart. Should've seen that red flag. Edit, words. I was an asshole. I didn't wanna talk things out, and it got the point where my ex didn't like being in the doghouse anymore. So, he broke it off with me. The ideas I had about our relationship as working but perfect came crashing down. I broke down and analyzed how I had fallen in love with the idea of him, and I had never truly been in love with him. We weren't working, and I wasn't working and putting in work into the relationship, and it wasn't fair for him. Him breaking up with me was the best thing to ever happen to me. I changed myself, figured out who I truly wanted to be with, and now I'm married to my best friend who works equal amounts to make sure that we are working together. The worst thing you can do is find someone who doesn't put equal amounts of effort into the relationship at the same times as you, especially during fights. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. I would be so grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. New videos every day.